97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco.
My first allegiance is what will be best for the Philadelphia Eagles and our fans for the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you locally by Dr. Lyle and Back. For everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery, go to iloveLyleBack.com. Call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle and Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4. Andrew DiCecco is in the house today. And he is a Football at 4 veteran, of course, of this topic, which is one Carson Wentz, who got traded today, Andrew. It's about time. Now let's get your initial reaction on the compensation. They obviously get in return here a third-round pick for this season and a conditional second-round pick for next season, which can turn into a first-round pick if he plays 75% of the snaps. So, did Howie Roseman get enough for Wentz?
Well, a major domino fell. It actually happened, Mike. I was starting to think that this was going to get pushed out into March, the way that things were sort of dragging on. But, you know, when you look at what they got back initially, it's easy to kind of, roll your eyes and say that's it. But, I mean, you got a guy who obviously didn't want to be here. The Eagles were starting to lose leverage. He was coming off a horrendous season and all these different reports. He pretty much handpicked where he wanted to go, and it was down to one team. I mean, the Bears kind of pulled away. So, I mean, what they were able to get, you look at, the conditional the second rounder in 2022 becomes a first rounder if Wentz plays 75% of the snaps or 70% and the team makes the playoffs. I mean, there's a strong likelihood that happens, and they end up with a first round pick anyway. And they get a decent pick in the third round, the 84th overall. There's going to be a ton of talent there that they can start to kind of restock the roster and have some playmakers there. Given everything that sort of transpired, I do think that what they were able to get in return was relatively decent given the circumstances.
I mean, how much? I feel like the conditional part of it, if he plays 75% of the snaps, it will become a first-round pick. If they end up getting the first, like if you reverse the years and that the condition, you can't do that because obviously the conditional was based on playing time. But if they got a first-round pick this year and a third-round pick next year, as opposed to a third-round pick this year and a potential first-round pick next year, do we feel differently if that pick, the better pick, comes this season?
Yeah, I think so, just because you look at what the roster, you look at the current state of the Eagles roster, and they really need to get younger, and they need to hit on a lot of these younger players and start landing some building blocks here if you want to kind of turn the ship around and get things headed in the right direction. So I think, impatience from many fans' perspective can say, I don't want to wait until 2022. We need that pick now. But, I mean, I think the likelihood is very good that the Eagles are going to get a first-round pick out of this. I do think that the Colts are going to head back to the playoffs, and I think that given the offensive line and the pieces around Carson, I think that he'll remain upright and be able to play a significant chunk of the portions there with the Colts. And, I think it'll kind of work out well for everyone involved.
Reports lately were saying that Wentz doesn't want to be in Chicago if that was the team that was going to win the battle, if you will, for Carson Wentz. But even if that is true and that is the case and he had a lot to say in what was going down, are you surprised that at the end of the day there was really one or two teams involved? I mean, we are talking about a guy outside of last year that had a track record of a skill set that is insane in this league, and now here he is available for a trade and not with some heavy package tied to him in terms of compensation and like big package like a Deshaun Watson type deal, and yet we're only hearing one or two names. It just seems so outrageous.
Yeah, well, remember, as talented and the high ceiling that Carson Wentz has, he does come with a little bit of a risk. And you started to see that a team like the Bears pull away, and the Carolina Panthers, who you saw Adam Kaplan tweet about earlier today, well, they're going to look elsewhere. I don't think there was many teams in play here. I think Carson really zeroed in on the team that he wanted to go to.
Andrew, I think there was one team in play, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And there was one team in play. I always think that it was like that. I never thought that. I mean, if Carson didn't want to go to Chicago, they were never in play to begin with. You know what I mean? Like, he wanted to go to Indianapolis. There's a familiarity there. There's a lot of pieces around him for him to be successful. And I think ultimately, when he looked at the situation, he said, "I want to go to Indianapolis, or you guys figure it out."
All right. So what about what do you think if they said after last year? Because obviously they draft Hurts, they're maybe disenchanted with their quarterback play. What if they tried to trade him last year? Do you think they would have got a lot of calls and a much bigger haul?
Well, yeah, because he's
I guess to kind of, how much did his play in this particular? He has one season where he played really bad. How much did that drive the price down?
Well, given the other quarterbacks that are kind of in play for the offseason, some of these guys have a lot less risk, albeit they don't have the potential upside of a Carson Wentz. But you more or less know what you're getting with these guys, like a Sam Darnold. He's up and down play, but he's relatively, he doesn't have the highest of highs and lowest of lows. You can kind of there's the sense that you can bring him into a different situation and get him around coaches, and he's going to kind of take the coaching, absorb that, and hopefully that'll translate onto the field. With Carson, you hear all these different reports about how he could be difficult to coach. He's hard-headed, he's stubborn, as most franchise quarterbacks are. But when you're coming off a season like that, you're gonna want a quarterback coming in there that's going to take the coaching and say, you know what, I need to reinvent myself and figure out what I need to do to get back to where I was. And I think that kind of made a lot of teams hesitate on getting to the front of that line. And that's why I think that this year in particular, you saw such a regression, and the mechanically, and you saw the turnovers that you would just see from a day 3 rookie that would be throwing instead of a 5th-year veteran. I think that kind of sent off a lot of alarms for teams, and you couple that with his personality and how it's not for everybody, and I think that kind of scares some teams off.
Do you think that this changes the current market, or is this similar to Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford, where it's kind of its own identity? That didn't really play a factor in other moves. Is this Wentz deal so unique that it won't really change maybe what other quarterbacks go for?
Yeah, Hunter, that's kind of how I took it. This is just such a unique one, much like the Stafford and Jared Goff one, where you rarely see a quarterback for quarterback deal. I think this one's very unique in itself. So I don't necessarily think that this is going to change the market or reset anything. It's just kind of something that needed to get done, and it's not really common, and not something you're really going to see every year. But it's a major domino to follow to kind of kick off the offseason here.
All right, Football 4, Andrew DiCecco, obviously huge news today. Carson Wentz has been traded. When you watch Wentz, now you study draft and techniques and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. What have you seen over his career that has kind of diminished? I mean, do you see diminishing mechanics? Or do you see a guy that is fixable, or a guy that, the Colts are going to get and say, we don't have to do a lot to fix this guy. He's a very good player. We just need to get him in the right system. What do you think about Wentz now, about how he got to this point and where he can go?
Well, he gets happy feet in the pocket, and that's naturally going to happen when you're kind of, under siege, for lack of a better term. He drops his eyes. He falls away from throws. He doesn't necessarily trust his pass targets, and he locks in on the guys that he's most comfortable with. And those are tendencies that teams really started to, teams were privy to that, and he struggled when a lot of his bad habits started to, teams started to catch on to a lot of his bad habits, and he never really adjusted to that, whether that be, the coaching that he was getting from Press Taylor, or his lack of wanting to change and thinking that he can kind of get himself out of that funk because of his supreme athleticism. But, speaking of that athleticism, you kind of saw a little bit of that deteriorate, his lack of mobility and ability to extend plays. He didn't really have that same burst that he had in his first 2 seasons. Obviously, you can chalk some of that up to injuries, but he also got a little bit bigger. He added a little bit more muscle to his frame, and he was able to absorb some of those hits a little bit more. Those are some of the things that stuck out immediately.
Yeah, I know that, some people think he's going to go to Indianapolis and just, become the player that he was. Do you see that happening? That he will thrive again in another system? It is as simple as that.
Well, I certainly think that he's set up for success there. He has the support team around him. Most importantly, he has a stellar offensive line. Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly. There's just some top tier players there, and then you look at the young group of pass catchers, the Michael Pittmans, the Zach Pascals. They have an undrafted rookie from last season, DeMichael Harris, who I consider to be like a poor man's Jalen Reagor, in that you can move him around if he's kind of utilized that way with Nick Sirianni. So they and T.Y. Hilton's still there. We don't know if he'll be there for the long term, but I mean they have a number of tight ends. He has a connection with Trey Burton. Noah Togiai's there, Mo Alley Cox. They have a lot of pieces there, and he's there with familiarity with Frank Reich and everything like that. So I think that it's the best possible destination that he could have landed.
Is Jalen Hurts the best possible situation for the Eagles next season at starting quarterback?
I've gotten asked that a lot today alone, Hunter, and I would say the Eagles aren't positioned to win, to contend for a championship this year. I think you owe it to Jalen Hurts. You owe it to, your draft evaluators and, your front office. You like the guy enough to take him 53 overall when you had a guy that you invested in Carson Wentz. Let it play out. Give this guy a full offseason. Let him adjust to Nick Sirianni's system. Let him build that continuity and really resonate as a leader in that locker room and build continuity with those wide receivers. And let him play a full season before you get an accurate, in order to get an accurate sample size of what he's really capable of. If it doesn't work out, okay, well, you're going to be, in all likelihood, you're going to have a high pick next year anyway, and then you kind of reevaluate where you go from there. But given the holes that just permeate the roster, I think that you owe it to this young quarterback in Jalen Hurts to start restocking a roster, because instead of fooling around trying to find the perfect quarterback, I think you need to start getting younger and adding playmakers on there and give this guy a chance to be successful.
Yep, I know a lot of people want to know about, and you're the perfect guy to talk to. Is Jalen Hurts to you a better, I don't say prospect maybe, but would you have had him if he was in this draft? These guys are obviously would be high. I mean, these guys are first-round picks. So if you have an option at quarterback at number 6 now, do you like these guys who will be available at 6 significantly better than you like Hurts?
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Justin Fields is a much better prospect. I like him more as a prospect coming out than I like Jalen. I think Trey Lance has some desirable traits and that will translate to the NFL level, but we don't know that. And how much better are they right now than Jalen Hurts? There's question marks with all those prospects not named Trevor Lawrence. And I mean, I think that when you're talking about, those guys can't miss prospects, in my opinion. Enough so where you're going to bypass a wide receiver that you can add to your team and start to add building blocks. Enough that you could bypass a potential offensive lineman. You need to start doing those things before you can really know what you have in Jalen Hurts. And I think that at least that Jalen Hurts has taken snaps in the National Football League. He's offered glimpses of what he's capable of. And I think that they can take that and mold him into being an NFL quarterback. And I think you owe it to this young coaching staff to have that opportunity.
Hypothetically, let's say Jalen Hurts is the guy. What do you think he needs to improve on the most this offseason to become a better version of himself?
I would say accuracy. I would say arm. He needs to work on delivering the ball with more velocity. There's not much he can do for arm strength. It's kind of what it is. But he needs to build continuity with his receivers, because I think there's a lot of, he was kind of thrown in there. And I think the fact that he's getting the receivers together to work on timing routes and build that, camaraderie amongst the unit, I think that's going to translate onto the football field. He was kind of thrown in there. There wasn't really, the training camp was abbreviated. And you kind of saw that they weren't always on the same page. I think sometimes Jalen has happy feet and he's so quick to kind of extend plays outside of the pocket. I think he needs to kind of, stay within structure and try to make plays from the pocket. And he obviously has to be more consistent in the second half of games. I mean, he comes out on fire a lot of times. And then when teams adjust at halftime, he didn't adjust, or the Eagles coaching staff didn't adjust. And that was very evident. And that was some of the reason why the offense stalled, largely many of the reasons why the offense stalled in the season. Has to get cleaned up. And I ultimately think that it will. And I'm excited to see what he can do with the new coaching staff.
All right, we will continue to look forward now that the trade has been made. What's next? They do get that extra third-round pick this year. How would you evaluate this draft in terms of depth? You know, is this a draft, hey, that having 2 third-round picks will come in handy?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, you know, if there's a player you really like in the second round and you want to package those thirds and move up, you can do that. We talk about linebacker and how that's not high on the Eagles' priority list, but in the third round, like they took Davion Taylor last year, there's talent that you can find there in the third round. I really like Jabril Cox, the linebacker from LSU. I think he's more likely to be available at 70 than he would be at 84, of course. But I mean, there's talent at wide receiver that will reach in the, you know, bleed into the third round that you can find there. There's going to be a lot of talent that, you know, a lot of depth in certain areas that the Eagles are really deficient at that I think they can capitalize on with that pick. So, I mean, and like I said, I really love the talent in the second round, Mike, and if they really want to, they could package the 2 thirds and move up to the high second and really get another building block.
Since we're on draft evaluation, when Dillard's name popped up the other week or so about maybe in a trade package, Gil and I were discussing, well, how bad of a look would it be to, you know, get rid of your first-round left tackle and move him along? And we were curious, do you remember where you evaluated him pre-draft before the Eagles selected Andre Dillard? Where did he rank in terms of your thoughts at that time?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you asked me that question because when he was available there, I remember my one buddy, he texted me and he said, who do you think the Eagles go for? And at the time I said, I thought it was Titus Howard because there's a story that I put out, I guess it was around that time during the pre-draft process that Titus Howard was going to visit Philadelphia on a pre-draft visit. Jeff Stoutland really liked the guy. He was right in that area. He was a late riser. I remember I put out that there was an AFC team that had him rated as a late first-round pick. So he was sitting there, and I thought that he was going to be the guy. But I remember not being in disbelief that Andre Dillard was still there because I thought he was more of a polished, pro-ready prospect. But that just goes to show you that, you know, you have to have it, you know, between the ears, too. You have to be mentally tough. You have to have – there's certain qualities you have to have as a first-round pick that in order for your athleticism and traits to translate to the professional level. And, you know, I thought that was a great pick at the time, but, you know, certain things have kind of occurred over that time period that you start to question, you know, what he really conveyed in the interview room at the combine and certain things like that, because physically and athletically, the guy's got it. He came from a very pass-heavy situation at Washington State. And, you know, he really stood out and he's athletic and everything, but there's certain things that you're starting to see. Is he physically tough enough? Is he mentally tough enough to thrive at this level? And when you're talking about an offensive lineman, a left tackle, a blindside protector, nonetheless, I mean, those are areas of concern.
Yeah. The one unfortunate thing is, one, there was a lot of reports that he came into training camp like 20 pounds heavier, that he was in some good shape, ready to get the start, and then he ends up getting hurt. I think, Andrew, and you could probably speak to this, when he played left tackle in place of Peters, he handled himself well. It was that one disastrous night at right tackle that everybody remembers, and it's almost like that's all anybody thinks of now, and nobody is giving the kid a chance to be able to play now based on that one game. But the 3 nights that he played, or 3 games that he played left tackle, by all accounts, he played very well.
I would say he played decent. He played fairly well, and he offered signs, Mike, of being a young player that showed promise. You know, and you wanted to see what he could do. You really wanted to see what he could do this offseason and in the preseason. He was a player that I really wanted to watch. You know, had they had a preseason. And right now, Jordan Mailata is the apple of many fans' eye right now because of his story and what he showed on the field. It's just his progression in such a short period of time is nothing short of remarkable. And I think they kind of put Andre Dillard on the back burner, but I think it's too premature to at this point to move on from Andre Dillard. I think the Eagles certainly don't have an embarrassment or riches at the offensive line that they can afford to, cut ties with, former first-round pick nonetheless. So I think that they need to really evaluate him, give him a long look this summer. I think he could also get some looks at guard. If nothing else, he can be depth. But I think that the Eagles recent history has shown that the Eagles can never have too much depth on the offensive line. And he really deserves a long look this season.
Yeah, the problem a lot of people will have with that, Andrew. And look, if Mailata gets to start because he beats him out, you have a 7th-round pick who beats out a 1st-round pick. Then it's, hey, you took a 1st-round pick and you missed on that. So that's just another strike against your draft record if you're Howie Roseman. If the 7th-rounder beats out the 1st-rounder, you don't get credit for finding the 7th-rounder because your 1st-rounder got beat by him. So he's in a no-win situation there.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? And that's the right way to approach it, Mike. You have to you don't just hand Jordan Mailata the spot. You don't just hand Andre Dillard the spot because of his draft pedigree. You let those two guys duke it out, and the best man's going to win. And like you said, if Andre Dillard loses that battle, it's going to look, it's just another blemish on Howie Roseman's track record.
All right, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Andrew DiCecco, good stuff. We can start to focus on the offseason, the draft, free agency will be beginning here in about 3 weeks. And, of course, we'll be all over that. And, of course, follow Andrew at DiCecco NFL. And, of course, right here during Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Andrew, thank you, man.
Guys, have a great rest of the week.
You do the same. He'll be back on Tuesday. Tomorrow it's Adam Kaplan. We'll get his take on this trade as the dust will have settled. And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Football at 4, brought to you by Dr. Lyle and Back. For everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery, go to iloveLyleBack.com or call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle and Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4.